Hi, Brent Adams here. I direct the Warming Center program. I operate Footbridge Homeless Services Center. I've chaired the Santa Cruz Coalition on Homelessness, now renamed We Are Santa Cruz, and a few other Facebook and Instagram pages like We Are Santa Cruz, highly likely where you're sourcing this from. Want to talk about this article here on this TV screen here. Santa Cruz sets end date for the largest homeless camp. That they're referring to the Benchlands. I call it Benchlands 4.0. If you include the Ross camp from a few years ago. Since 2017-18, we've seen these large mega human dumping ground camps. We call them human dumping ground camps because this is where people have been allowed to set up tents and to be in the ways that they have been, with some help from the city and the county, porta potties, dumpsters, things like that, limited support. But since they're not in our neighborhood, setting up tents along our street, on our sidewalks in the business district or the tourist area, that's been allowable in these spaces. So it has provided a service, but also a vast disservice for the community at large and the people in those spaces. That's another conversation. Then we have these $1 million camps that the city and the county have been hosting over the last few years, where they close these camps and make a small space, 50 or more, 50 or less, as much as $2,000 per person, penciling out to as much as $1 million per year for some of these. So we've been slamming back and forth between these two poles, human dumping ground camp, $1 million camp, all the while made possible by Martin versus Boise and the pandemic. Let me tell you, Martin versus Boise is a federal statute that said you can't criminalize homelessness if you don't have enough shelter beds to eclipse that number. So that's why from San Diego all the way to Seattle and inland, these large camps have been popped up, also because of the pandemic and the shelter-in-place orders to make sure that people are safe and sound. We allowed camping. So this is a kind of a perfect storm, and we've seen these large camps. But of course, all these cities, counties, all over the country want to start criminalizing homelessness again. In Santa Cruz, there's like a 40-year statute that's ordinance that said you can't sleep outside at night. You couldn't even lay under a blanket after 11 p.m. in Santa Cruz. That's how bad it was. So there had been some sanity thanks to Martin versus Boise, but all these cities want to kind of find a way through. So one way they're going to do it is to create enough shelter beds so that they can point to them and show that the people outside have these other opportunities. We're not going to read this whole thing here, but we're going to just get to this the last three paragraphs or so. I know I'm a little bit choppy with this video here. Let's do this quickly. Reaching the need. Up at the Armory, 10 of the 75 shelter program spaces are to be held on reserve for on-demand night-only beds for immediate emergency access to shelter by law enforcement and other service providers. So they're not going to be, so the 75 people can stay there day and night. They have shuttle up and down, there are showers up there, but 10 of those 75 are going to be on lock for one night only. And let's talk about why that is. Of course, Justin Cummings says 150 beds is not going to allow, so they're talking about 75 up there and then 2 transitional camps, quote, where so they're saying of the 400 or more, probably 1,000 people out in Santa Cruz. I keep looking over here, but the camera's here. Yeah. How is that? So it's not that even 150 isn't going to be enough. But I know for years now there's been a lot of issues with Martin versus Boise, but it would seem as if those 10 beds would fill pretty quickly, and then as a result, we're having the same situation where we don't have enough beds. Therefore, can we not move people who are experiencing homelessness? Cassie Bronson of the city attorney's office responded to Cummings that not all individuals want to stay in shelters or managed camps. We're not quite sure where she gets that data. But the city's goal is to keep an option available for those who do want shelter. Maintaining the 10 emergency beds would enable the city to offer shelter before city officers enforce the no camping ordinance. So this is key. They want to enforce the no camping ordinance. I think there's another line that we're missing here. Yeah, I think the city's goal, it's my understanding, is to establish a level of shelter capacity where we can say that there is frequently or always some level of availability. So they want to be able to enforce the no camping ordinance. They want to be able to enforce the no camping ordinance, not provide adequate shelter or services. And they need to be able to say that there is a frequently or always some level of availability. So we saw this in Watsonville a few years ago. I used to run the warming center program in Santa Cruz and Watsonville. By the way, just completed our 8th successful year of warming center in Santa Cruz. These are not city or county programs. These are volunteer programs that we formed a nonprofit to operate and open on the worst case nights of the year. And we had one in Watsonville for a couple years. Prior to that, there were a few shelter beds over there that were always open. And we're like, why are there always a few shelter beds open and all these people sleeping outside in Watsonville along the Pajaro, downtown? We realized that they weren't doing any outreach at all. So when we opened Julie Conway and others would say, oh no, there's shelter capacity in Watsonville. We're like, how can that be? There's so many people outside. We realized to a certain extent they maintain empty shelter beds in order to say that there's capacity. And they would say, like Ms. Bronson says here, is not all individuals want to stay in shelters or managed camps. Well, how do you know that? Our challenge was if we opened a warming center and if people didn't show up, that would be a tragedy for us. So we had street outreach. We put a lot of energy to let every single person outside know that there is a warming center, and it would fill up. We had as many as 120 people coming to the door at the downtown warming center when we were open. And then the Watsonville Warming Center had as many as 50 people on average, and that was in addition to the new Salvation Army shelter. So let me cut to the chase here. The $14 million, the new camping plan, and let's be clear again, it's been a comedy of errors from the city, hasn't it? The county kicked a bunch of people out of the benchlands a summer or two ago in order to create another $1 million encampment, but paid for by the county in the benchlands, and everyone was forced up to the Duck Pond camp, where we finally had as many as 100 people. Then there was the Battle of the Duck Pond. During a governor order shelter-in-place mandate, the city tried to kick those people out with no place for them to go. Homelessness Union sued the city successfully, and there was an injunction. People ended up finally repopulating the benchlands. They've been there ever since. That's well over a year ago. No plan. We get this $14 million on the table. But before that, there was the TOLO, the temporary outdoor living ordinance, where the city wanted to put people in all of our natural areas, right? And then there was the Seabright Strong, where the city was going to have people lining tents on the sidewalks of our light industrial areas. It's just been ridiculous thing after ridiculous thing. Then over the last spring, a year ago, today practically, the city opened up requests for proposals, RFQ, to offer church groups, nonprofits, an opportunity to work with the city to operate transitional camps, novel hygiene programs, programs like that. They didn't accept one of those. They didn't even really the guy who was managing it quit midstream. They hired all these new people. They just dashed that whole thing, got the $14 million, and now it's not about programs, although there's always talking about the mythical navigation center that's never been defined, not successful in San Francisco. Is it a service center? Of course, they're going to give Housing Matters, that closed its door to services 2 years ago, turn their backs on people with services in order for the new paradigm of housing first. Of course, we love that. It sounds so good. People get people housing because shelter doesn't end homelessness, housing does. Regardless of the fact that there's no funding for housing from the federal government, only funding for programs to put people on that golden bridge to nowhere. It's been unsuccessful in every city from San Diego to Seattle. Well, we still love it here. Let's put people on that pathway. They released 200 more housing vouchers and didn't open up one new room. So you got more and more people fighting over this non-existent housing. All the while, with the talking points that they're going to be, it's service oriented and all this jargon, mumbo jumbo. It's not true. What this is, the proof is here. They want to enforce a no camping ordinance and say that there's some level, they want to point to those 10 beds up at the armory and say, see, there's shelter capacity. Therefore, we have the ability to write these citations. And that's the future. They're giving most of this money to the police department and opening up all these new roles yet undefined. We don't even know how we're going to pay for them in the future. They're not service providers. They're law enforcement officials. So that's really what's going to happen. They're going to close the large camp in the benchlands, point to those 10 beds up there, and begin criminalizing people. Some people will really think that's a good idea. Some people won't. We don't really. So here's the problem we have in Santa Cruz and all cities like this. Almost nobody thinks that people should be able to camp anywhere they want to, unimpeded, and set up as much shanty up, whatever. Very few people think that. Very few people are on the other extreme, think that nobody should be able to camp anywhere in Santa Cruz, and homelessness people should be completely eradicated. So most of us live someplace in the middle, but there's no conversation about the compromises we need to be making, that we have to, we need a coexistence model. We need awareness and a vision forward. We need leaders. We need leadership that can bring that conversation. What are we willing to tolerate? What do we want to provide? What do we think people need? And how do we stop this scourge of the large dumping ground camp that's largely a drug oriented, where people can set up their tents next to a dealer, use night and day, fentanyl, meth, heroin, whatever. So it becomes largely about that. The crime that surrounds that, it's not appropriate. So criminalizing is the exact opposite, shutting down these large camps with nothing really else offered. Here we go again, polarity exercise with no conversation about the space in the middle. We need agreement camps. We need authentic transitional camps where nonprofits should be able to apply for a permit to operate in a camp and share the burden. And you really need a mission-oriented entity, not a city staff run program. That doesn't have the right vibe. It's been proven year after, long ago. Paul Lee wrote it in his book, Quality of Mercy. City staff does not operate appropriately a homeless shelter or a homeless program. You need nonprofits to do that. Mission-oriented, they have that humanitarian quality. I'm over talking now. Well, follow us here. We are Santa Cruz. Write an email to wearesantacruz@gmail.com, and we're going to start this movement, this conversation of awareness and getting that vision forward, so that instead of protesting stupid stuff that the city does, we actually need the city to orient towards the will of the people. Thank you.